All you need is a cup or mug or glass, a tankard, chalice or stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. Join me now for the unparalleled pleasure, the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better. It's called the simultaneous sip, and it happens now. Go. Yeah, that's good. There it is, that first hit of clarity. The news flow right now feels like the universe is running one of those rare alignment sequences where everything connects. Wealth exploding for the actual builders instead of just the usual suspects. Legacy financial systems glitching under pressure. Hard-nosed national security moves on AI and gangs. And a reality TV disruptor in local politics refusing to play the quiet loser role. These aren't isolated dots. They're signals of a larger pattern. Systems that reward contribution are winning, while captured or complacent ones are cracking. Let's unpack it with the kind of systems thinking that turns random headlines into a coherent story about where this all heads. First, the SpaceX IPO creating roughly 4,400 new millionaires overnight. Not in the executive suite alone, not filtered through layers of venture capital preference stacks. This hit the welders, the software engineers who joined early, the technicians who kept the launch cadence alive through the Falcon 1 failures, and even some of the support staff who believed enough to take equity over higher immediate pay. One story circulating involves a welder who started as a contractor making around $28 an hour years ago. His initial grant and accumulated shares turned into life-changing money. Another long-timer who turned down more stable gigs elsewhere now sits on 8 figures. These aren't lottery winners. These are people who showed up when the probability of success looked low and the hours looked endless. This is what ownership culture actually looks like when it's implemented seriously. Most companies talk a big game about aligning incentives, but deliver stock options that vest over years only for the top 5%. SpaceX pushed equity deeper because the mission, making humanity multiplanetary, required everyone rowing in the same direction. The result? A proof point that broad-based capitalism still works when you let talent and risk-taking compound without artificial caps. Critics will call it luck or hype, but that's missing the point. The company executed through regulatory battles, technical setbacks, and competition that wanted it dead. The wealth distribution is the market's verdict on value created. Compare that to the Robinhood outage during the same volatile period. Retail investors trying to react to the SpaceX ticker movement found themselves locked out. Sell orders didn't execute. Options positions decayed in the void. Individual losses mounted into the hundreds of thousands collectively, maybe more. The platform blamed unprecedented traffic, which is what they always say. This isn't some grand conspiracy. It's simpler and more damning. Legacy brokerage infrastructure was built for a world where retail was small and slow. When real volume hits from a genuine wealth creation event, the consumer-facing layer buckles. Meanwhile, institutional players with co-location, direct market access, and human brokers probably navigated it fine. This contrast is pure persuasion gold. One system, SpaceX, distributed upside to the contributors who made the upside possible. The other, parts of the financial plumbing, treated retail participants as participants until the stress test hit, then reminded them of their place in the stack. Every time this pattern repeats, more people wake up to the need for better tools, more transparent platforms, and ownership models that don't evaporate when volatility spikes. It's not anti-finance, it's pro-competence. The companies that figure out how to give users real reliability and skin in the game will eat the lunch of the ones that don't. Now pivot to the AI front, because this one carries heavier stakes. The US government applied export controls to Anthropic's top models, Fable 5 and Mythos 5. These aren't toys. They're the frontier systems pushing benchmarks in reasoning, coding, and multimodal tasks. The controls target access by foreign governments, entities, and nationals from certain countries. Compliance meant Anthropic had to flip the kill switch globally, rather than attempt impossible real-time nationality screening across every API call and user. The models went dark for everyone to avoid any leakage risk. This is the adult version of AI policy. For years, we've watched the open source everything immediately crowd argue that diffusion equals safety. That view always ignored the asymmetric nature of the technology. If a capability jumps from impressive demo to strategic advantage that can design novel pathogens, break encryption at scale, or coordinate cyber operations, then treating it like a better search engine is malpractice. The U.S. still leads in the foundational layers: talent concentration, compute clusters, energy infrastructure, and data advantages. Export controls are a way to preserve that lead without pretending the rest of the world shares our interests. Critics will frame this as protectionism hurting innovation. Fair point on the margin. Some international researchers lose access. Collaboration slows. But the counter is straightforward. The downside of losing the AI race is existential in ways that a temporary access chill is not. We've already seen chip export rules slow adversaries. Model controls extend that logic to the software layer. It's messy implementation, yes. Companies like Anthropic face real revenue hits and talent pressure. Yet the alternative, watching equivalent capabilities proliferate unchecked, carries bigger tail risks. This move signals that Washington is finally treating frontier AI as dual-use infrastructure with national security implications, not just another SaaS product. Expect more of this calibration as capabilities scale. Let's linger on the security action because this one deserves extra unpacking. The announcement of a U.S. drone strike eliminating Niño Guerrero, the leader of Tren de Aragua, marks a sharp pivot in how transnational threats get handled. Tren de Aragua didn't start as just another street gang. It emerged from the chaos of Venezuela's collapsed institutions, literally born out of the notorious Tocorón prison, where inmates ran a parallel criminal enterprise with its own hierarchy, torture chambers, and business lines. What began as extortion and local predation evolved into a sophisticated export operation. Human trafficking, drug distribution, money laundering, and brutal violence transplanted directly into American cities. This gang brought a level of organization and savagery that stood out even by cartel standards. Reports tied them to high-profile incidents, targeted killings, brutal assaults, and a network that exploited open migration pathways to embed operatives across multiple states. Unlike traditional mafia structures that sometimes kept a lower profile, TDA operated with a mix of social media bravado and prison gang discipline that made them particularly destabilizing. They weren't just committing crimes, they were projecting power, testing boundaries, and turning neighborhoods into contested territory. The human cost wasn't abstract statistics. It was families losing loved ones, businesses facing extortion, and communities watching public safety erode in real time. The strike itself was the kind of clean, decisive action that changes calculations downstream. U.S. Southern Command executed it with precision, confirming the elimination without turning it into a prolonged spectacle. No multi-year manhunt theater. No hand-wringing about root causes while the body count climbed. Just identification of a command node responsible for directing operations inside the United States, followed by removal. This treats the gang not as a distant social ill, but as an active threat actor with reach across borders. In systems terms, it severs leadership connectivity, disrupts command and control, and injects massive uncertainty into the rest of the network. Lieutenants now have to wonder who is next, how compromised their communications are, and whether the old playbook of operating with impunity still applies. The persuasion power here is enormous because it contrasts so cleanly with prior approaches. For years, the dominant framework treated these flows as manageable law enforcement problems. More indictments, more task forces, more studies. That model assumes symmetric rules, cooperative international partners, and threats that respect procedural boundaries. TDA exposed the mismatch. A highly adaptive, low accountability organization exploiting gaps in sovereignty. Previous policies that prioritized volume over vetting effectively subsidized the problem by creating pathways for embedding. The new posture flips the script. Offensive capability paired with clear signaling that certain lines, once crossed, trigger direct response. Will this end all gang activity? Of course not. Criminal networks are resilient. They adapt, decentralize, and regenerate. But removing a high-visibility leader like Guerrero does more than one decapitation. It degrades morale, slows recruitment, forces resource diversion into security, and buys time for follow-on operations. It also sends ripples to other groups contemplating similar expansion. Deterrence lives in the credible demonstration of reach and willingness. When operators see that even a top figure directing US-based violence can be reached without warning, the expected value of that strategy drops. This is classic high-agency response to a high-agency threat. The usual objections are predictable and already circulating. Concerns about escalation, questions of jurisdiction, claims that this militarizes what should stay in the courts. Those carry some abstract weight until you weigh them against the concrete alternative: continued importation of violence with no counterweight. Public safety isn't a theoretical debate. It's the baseline that lets everything else function. When a gang imports prison war tactics into American streets, the procedural purists' concerns start sounding like luxury beliefs. The people living closest to the problem notice the difference when leadership nodes disappear and activity patterns shift. Results over ritual. This move fits the broader competence pattern. It pairs with the AI controls as dual expressions of prioritizing core functions. Protect strategic edges in technology. Protect physical security at home. Both reject the diffusion at all costs mindset that dominated earlier thinking. Diffusion sounds compassionate until you realize some capabilities and some actors don't share your values or restraint. Treating borders, technology, and threats with adult seriousness isn't hawkish posturing. It's pattern recognition applied to reality. Then there's the LA mayoral race chaos. Spencer Pratt concedes, but immediately floats the existence of resignation-worthy recordings involving a leading candidate, whether Karen Bass or Nithya Raman. Pratt ran as the outsider, the meme-adjacent reality guy injecting unpredictability into a machine politics city. LA's problems are well documented. Persistent homelessness despite billions spent, crime spikes rationalized as social issues, infrastructure fragility exposed by every fire season, and governance that feels optimized for narrative over outcomes. Decades of one-party dominance produced the predictable entropy. Pratt not fading quietly is the interesting part. By teasing audio that could force a resignation in shame, he's weaponizing transparency, or the threat of it, against the establishment. Whether the tapes deliver remains to be seen, but the move itself alters incentives. It forces candidates and incumbents to sweat the "what if they recorded that meeting" variable. In a city where accountability has felt optional for years, even the possibility introduces friction that favors better behavior. Outsiders like this are often dismissed as unserious until they expose serious rot. The dynamic echoes national patterns. When legacy power structures face unscripted challengers, the discomfort reveals how much was previously unchallenged. Zoom out and the simultaneous threads form a bigger picture. Wealth creation at SpaceX shows what aligned incentives and mission-driven ownership can do. The Robinhood hiccup shows where legacy layers still fail under load. AI export controls and the gang strike show government remembering it has a core job: protect the competitive edge and physical security of the citizenry. The LA drama shows local systems under pressure from disruptors unwilling to accept managed decline. This isn't utopian. Every one of these stories has friction. Some employees at SpaceX might still feel the pre-IPO grind was brutal. Anthropic's global shutdown creates real short-term pain for users and researchers doing legitimate work. Drone strikes always carry second-order effects. Pratt's move could be theater, or could fizzle. Systems thinking doesn't require perfection. It requires direction of travel. The direction here bends toward rewarding builders, securing advantages, removing threats, and exposing complacency. The pattern favors people who bet on execution over narrative. Companies that give real ownership to contributors outperform those that don't. Nations that protect key technologies and act on security threats stay ahead of those that broadcast openness as virtue. Cities that face disruption might finally confront failures that polite consensus papered over. The simulation is testing these hypotheses in real time, and the early returns favor competence clusters. People often ask me about persuasion in chaotic times. The best persuasion isn't shouting one side is evil. It's showing observable results and letting patterns do the heavy lifting. SpaceX's millionaire wave persuades more about capitalism's upside than any lecture. A frozen trading app during a real event persuades more about infrastructure risk than abstract warnings. Visible action against a gang leader persuades more than another task force announcement. An outsider with receipts persuades more than polished pressers about progress. We're in a correction phase after years of diffused accountability, open border experiments, technology diffusion without guardrails, and financial systems optimized for incumbents. Corrections create volatility, but they also clear space for better equilibria. The dopamine from that first sip this morning isn't just caffeine. It's the recognition that some systems are self-correcting in productive ways. More coffee is definitely required. The day is young, the patterns are clarifying, and the upside belongs to those positioned to ride the competence wave.
Yeah, that's good.